Well, hello and welcome to the Purple Inspiration podcast. As you know, this is a space for extraordinary women leaders who rise above the noise. And we are happy to kick off today with Audrey Coleman, who is the director of the Robert J. Dole Institute of Politics on the campus at KU. I want to just give you a little background of why this is important to me. I first met Bob Dole when I was interviewing for a job on his 1988 presidential campaign. He actually stood and recruited me for the job, and I got the job. And I worked for the person that what preceded Audrey, Bill Lacey, in this position. So I've been around Senator Dole for more than 30 years. I had the honor to work with him for 4 years in the U.S. Capitol, which was an extraordinary experience that most people don't get. It was phenomenal. I had a chance to travel with him just after the fall of communism in 1991, and to work with him on the appointment of the first person with a disability to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, which was really one of the great honors of my life. I worked on his 96 presidential campaign. You might know he ran for president 3 times. Didn't quite get there, but he was the GOP nominee in 1996. I also had the chance to work with Secretary Dole, Elizabeth Dole, who we'll talk about a little bit as well, when she was between cabinet positions, and during her presidential campaign in 2000, where for a while there she was polling just below President George W. Bush, who we all know got elected. I also had the chance to be a fall fellow at the Dole Institute in 2015, where I led sessions featuring extraordinary women in business and politics. People like our former Undersecretary of State, Ellen Tauscher, God rest her soul, she served under Hillary Clinton. The director of the White House Tour Office, Ellie Schaefer, who was the first LGBT to hold that position, my friend Lisa Gable, the ambassador of the World Expo, the first corporate secretary at Chevron, Lydia Beebe, who was also a KU alum and went to the law school there, and one of the most notable media experts in California. So I'm really, really proud to have been able to do that. I stayed in touch with Senator Dole for 35 years until he passed in 2021. And as Audrey knows, once you're part of the Dole family, you are part of the legacy. He always said the difference between possible and impossible is hard work and commitment. And I've taken that to heart with everything that I do in my community and the nonprofits I serve on and in my business life. But let's talk about Audrey. So Audrey's been the leader at the Dole Institute since 2012. She is currently the director. She was the former archivist to Senator Bob Dole, who in 2023 led a months-long commemorative effort honoring his 100th birthday and the 20th anniversary at the Dole Institute. This was really important to me because Bob Dole, although he didn't get elected to president and doesn't have a presidential library, he was the most conscientious and consensus-minded person I've ever met. Truly a great American who cared about his country, served in World War II, got the Purple Heart, and enacted some of the most consequential legislation in this country, including overhauling the food stamp program, rescuing Social Security, and the Americans with Disability Act. So, Audrey, welcome today. We're excited to have you.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Judy, and thanks so much for the opportunity to learn more about your podcast and all the great work you're doing. We miss you here at the Dole Institute. It's been over 10 years.
I know. And I've been back there, I think, once since then, but I need to make more trips out to Kansas, I think.
We'll come up with a reason to get you here.
Yes, we need to. So you have a lot of experience with public engagement across many disciplines, across generations, across political philosophies. And I read that you gave a commencement address in 2024 at KU and talked about the power to change the nature of political conversation, emphasizing constructive optimism and encouraging local activism. Well, that's really what this is all about at Purple Inspiration. We like to hear all sides rather than being misled by social media influencers who sometimes report things and use politics as combat rather than a way to bring our country together. So tell me, what's your recipe for success at the Dole Institute, and how do you engage in public policy discussions that are robust and have the opportunity to hear from all sides?
Sure. Well, again, thanks for the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing at the Dole Institute and why it works out so well from my perspective. I'll go way back, Judy, to the beginning of my time at the Dole Institute. You mentioned I started in 2012, and I did indeed, as an archivist. that background really carries me through in my leadership philosophy here when it comes to public engagement, because an archivist is not a historian or a curator. It's somebody who provides resources to other people so that they can get the answers to the questions that they have. And so when we're talking about building public programming, or programming that students are engaging with, or training students, coaching them really to have conversations on their own and leading balanced conversations, helping them to focus on being curious, to listen, and to focus on acquiring information that they want to learn about, and not so much articulating maybe your own perspective. Maybe you're stepping back, maybe you're sitting to the side and you're drawing in the perspectives of other people and trying to meet them where they are and understand their position from where they stand. So I think listening and humility are two big points that we emphasize with the students here and future generations. I mean, so much of our communication landscape, it's really different, because when you're on social media, it's all about, what do you think? What's your take? What's your opinion on this? And it's like, well, you have a lot of power and you can get a lot farther, at least initially, if you kind of just let yourself find out what you need to know and follow your heart and be curious and seek the answers to your own questions. We're human beings and not computers, and we have the power to assess and gather information and draw our own conclusions. So anymore, that's extremely important. The other thing that we emphasize too is developing culture and reaching beyond the folks that are right here at arm's length with us. I mean, we can't promote and grow a political culture that accepts and values bipartisan engagement if we're not reaching. The Doles did this, Bob Dole did this, Elizabeth Dole. You reach, it's a big tent, right? And you reach the people who are kind of maybe with you, but kind of skeptical, or you or say, oh, I'm just not even interested in what you have to say. Well, tell me about that. Tell me about what you need. What's your perspective? And then you say, oh, well, here's some information. Dole Institute, student programs, archives. Here's what we offer, and work as hard as you can. Always work on expanding, our community, our culture, our network. So those are kind of the core elements, Judy, I think, of what keep us going year to year and keep us thriving. I mean, you mentioned Senator Dole passing. It'll be 5 years ago this fall, or this December, and that's so unfortunate. We all miss him tremendously, but the culture that my predecessor, your friend Bill Lacey, and the leadership here that I inherited and that we've continued, is so strong with our student engagement. They're really looking for support in what we offer, and ways of being and thinking that just aren't fostered as they once were in our political discourse.
Well, I know when I was a fall fellow there, I had Eric Pauls as one of my kids that I was working with on the fellowship. He's on your board. I know Senator Dole is very fond of him. Great guy. I traveled with Robin Dole, so it's kind of nice to see the family stay together for all of these years. So, and I did see that bipartisanship firsthand. I used to say, whenever we had healthcare legislation, when we saw Senator Ted Kennedy go in the front door, not have to sneak in the back, we knew he had a deal. Because it's there to show everybody, I'm in the leader's office and we're going to do this. And they did. And that was really kind of, an amazing thing for me to watch and to witness firsthand with not just him, but Senator Dodd and other senators who were not of the same party. So, you talked a little bit about leadership lessons, and certainly Senators Dole, Bob, and Elizabeth have a vast network, as I just mentioned. How do you use that network that they built and worked so hard on, to cultivate programs and to get new partnerships for the Institute?
Yeah. No, thanks so much for that question. Well, first and foremost, when we're generating partnerships for programs and trying to reach audiences, particularly beyond Kansas and in Washington, D.C., and for the kind of relationships that will benefit our students, is look for other folks who are doing similar work and share a similar sense of mission, or their same commitment to bipartisanship. It's no surprise that the Bipartisan Policy Center in DC has been a wonderful partner for the last few years in bringing programs and conversations that seek to bridge divides when it comes to policy conversations. Former Members of Congress Association has been a great friend to us here at the Institute. We're going to be engaging with an organization called Future Caucus, formerly known as Millennial Action Project. Again, all of these organizations are people who are also bringing together leaders who are committed to seeing things not just in two different ways or two diametrically opposed ways, but here's our common ground. Here's how we're moving forward. We also collaborate heavily with other institutes of politics, say at Chicago, Harvard, Georgetown, in order to put our students here at KU in other environments and engage with other students who are similarly interested and also interested in having those conversations that can lead us in places where we can't anticipate. When you kind of take the time to build those relationships, take time to acquire new information and be willing to change your mind, although you don't have to. I mean, that's one of the big value or selling points that we have here at the Institute locally, is that, we're not a nonpartisan institution, we're a bipartisan institution. Senator Dole was not nonpartisan. I'm not asking you to not have an opinion. I'm not even asking you to change your opinion or your position. All I'm asking is for you to listen and be willing to take in, again, new information and be willing to connect with people. Our politics here at the Institute is that our philosophy is that politics is an opportunity to connect across differences. And that's a pretty radical idea for a lot of people because they are turned off by politics. It's too nasty. It's too divisive. Well, what if it was a tool to connect people? It has been. It can be. We need to do that more.
Well, this is part of why I decided to start this podcast, because I said, what happens when young women who are like me, I went in, I didn't have a whole lot of political connections. I think my dad's biggest check to a candidate was $25. But I just happened to get in with my own congressman and then move up and have the opportunity to work with Senator Dole and Elizabeth Dole and other leaders. And, I'm worried about people who don't take that path and who decide, I don't want to be involved in that, because it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
And it should be a more respectful, listening environment. And I think the listening piece is actually a really important piece that nobody thinks about how to be a good listener anymore. They're on their keyboard. They start to, spew away with their thumbs. I'm kind of like, sometimes I think if people had sprained thumbs, we'd have a more, conscientious country. So if people would talk, that's the other thing, a lot of young people today don't make phone calls anymore. You actually could solve a lot more in a phone call than you can through a text and through email.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And no, you make a great point. I mean, and so I feel as I'm sitting here and thinking about like, oh, well, you take the time and you build a relationship and you listen, and it sounds a little Pollyanna-ish. It maybe sound a little too simple, but actually it's really hard because we do not take the time and we have not cultivated the patterns of engagement. When I think about as an archivist, again, being able to look across a legacy of leadership over decades. How did Bob Dole, how did Elizabeth Dole do their work day to day that made them so effective? And how did they build their relationships? And it was because they took the time to build relationships, to build trust with other people, to imagine those areas of intersection, and to craft a policy that moved forward, that was amenable to the vast majority. That's hard. That's extremely hard. And when your environment around you is telling you that doesn't value it or is negative, or you're getting all this negative feedback about that work, it becomes even more difficult. But we have, as you know, at the Institute, a beautiful building with a museum and gallery and programming spaces, and we put so much effort into bringing people physically into those spaces, because when we take the time to break the easy patterns, that's a hard pattern to like get yourself somewhere physically anymore. If you can get here, maybe you'll come back again, and maybe you'll come back again, and that's really where it starts. It's like working out or eating your vegetables. If you don't start and keep doing it, it won't work.
Right. Well, and you have, as I recall, the largest stained glass flag in the United States. Is that still true?
That is true to our knowledge. And we repeat that, Judy.
Well, you know what we're going to do by the end, before the end of this broadcast, we're going to make sure that after we edit this, we're going to put that flag up so people can see how it's beautiful. That flag is one of the most incredible things I have ever seen in my life. And yeah, hats off to you and everyone whoever came up with that idea was a genius. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really transporting. I mean, there can be a crowd in this building, there can be nobody in this building, but if you're walking in for the first time, or I don't know however many hundreds or thousands of times I've walked into this building, but you stand there and you say, and people say, I'm so glad there is a place like this that
Yeah,
is dedicated to the kind of leadership, the kind of service, the kind of American spirit that we have here at the Dole Institute. How lucky are we?
absolutely. Well, let's pivot now. I know you have a big event coming up, the Salute to the Leader. I think this is the third one. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's going to be really appealing to people like me to be able to come back for that, and people back east in Washington D.C. who knew the Doles.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the opportunity to mention that. Yes, this is a Salute to the Leader 3. So it's been about, I'm going to do some quick mental math. I mean, 15 years since we did Salute to the Leader 2. I think it was 2011 and then 2007 before that. And we have experimented with doing different types of socials and programs in DC, but recognizing that this 1996, it's been 30 years since Senator Dole retired from the Senate on June 11th, and then again coming up in August, 30 years since he accepted the Republican nomination for president, which is, I mean, have this dual commemoration. It's been almost 5 years since he passed. We're so excited to invite, we call them our Dole alumni, which includes you, and it includes me now, Judy, which was such an honor. So anyone who worked for the senator at any capacity to or simply admire him and want to connect with folks who worked for the senator together in Washington, D.C. at Decatur House. It's going to be on the evening of September 16th. We're going to be launching an event website after July 4th with more details, but we are excited to have the opportunity. Senator Elizabeth Dole and Robin Dole are our honorary co-hosts, which is an extreme honor. We've got a great crew of folks, including yourself, Judy, who are on the host committee. And so really want to encourage all Dole alumni again. However, if you think you are, then you are, is what I would say. Don't say, well, am I close enough in? Was I authoritative enough? No, we want you here because we all know others, Judy, again, you and all the folks who worked with him closely during his political career and his legislative career. You mentioned it earlier, just how tightly that bond still holds. And that's pretty special to be in a room with Dole people.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I always said everybody who worked for Senator Dole was a good person who was honest and drawn to him because he was an honest politician. He was an honest broker in everything that he did. So, well, go ahead if you have something to say, and then I'm going to ask you a question.
No, I mean, I guess I would just reiterate that. I mean, the nature of his leadership, we don't see it in action as much or very little anymore. I am optimistic, just like he was, because we're all human beings with our own spirit and our own agency. I mean, there are clearly leaders who are leading, inspired by him, and are doing that. We just don't hear about it very much. And we need to inspire another generation to make sure that if they're not seeing that modeled every day, that again, they're getting exposure to people who are, or they're at least getting practice in the ideas and the ways of leading, listening, connecting that he and Senator Elizabeth have practiced over the course of their extensive, impressive, legendary careers, I'll say. And I don't think anybody would dispute that with me. So, our work is cut out with us. But as long as we're doing that, then he's still alive.
I view that exactly the same day. Well, let's talk a little bit about you. So I have a question for you, which is, what's the most interesting fact nobody knows about you? I actually posted mine the other day on Facebook, and I'm happy to talk about it after you. But what's your most interesting fact?
Well, Judy, I tend, what's interesting about me? I guess what I think it's important to know, or maybe one of the things that inspire me and drive me to be here and be doing what I'm doing, and that I think that Senator Dole also knew and appreciated, is that I'm a Kansan by birth and by choice. I mean, there was a lot of, I won't say pressure, but a lot of encouragement as a high school kid in Kansas to go out there and go to school elsewhere and then go get a career, nationally, internationally, that you would actualize in somewhere other than Kansas. And I grew up in a Kansas that was amazing. It was a Kansas that was led by folks like Senator Dole, represented by Senator Dole and Senator Kassebaum, and our great decades of governors who were wonderful at working in a bipartisan way for the good of the state. That I was really proud of that, and could not really imagine how it could get much better. And so I'm here blooming where I'm planted, and I'm not encouraging students to not go if they feel the call, but to feel proud if they decide that Kansas is where they want to stay and build their lives and their dreams, because I think it's a great place.
Well, I love being in Kansas. I traveled several times with Senator Dole, and then all the times I came out for my program with the Dole Institute. So big fan of the Midwest. Again, honest people, lots of farm agriculture people. They're always like the hardest working, and Senator Dole sure took care of them. Well, let me ask you this. I have one more question for you, which is, and maybe you just answered it, I'm not sure though. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self if you were looking back today?
Mm-hmm. I think, I would want that woman to know that you are where you are, and that's okay, that this is a process. I think there's a lot of pressure, at least in my lifetime, and still on young women and young people in general, to make sure you're achieving and, going, what's your next step? What's your next step? What's your next step? Or that you're not excellent until you get to XYZ point. And that's just simply not true. And everything that has been good in my career over the last decade or two has been me being me, which is kind of hard to, is that all I need to do, is be me and be natural? And people will respond to that. And I don't need to be, of course, as a person, I'm ambitious and I work hard and I've got those qualities. And so that's good. But I think just kind of trusting yourself in a way that it's kind of impossible to, I don't want to say it's impossible. I think there are a lot of really outstanding young people there that are probably better at it than I am. But I don't know about you, Judy, but it takes some time to cultivate that. But when you are true to where you respect your own process, you stay where you are, and the doors start opening. And then it's not so hard anymore, because you're just, again, like doing things the way you do them.
Well, Audrey, that authenticity piece is so important. I always tell people, don't go out bragging about something you're doing if it's not something you're actually doing. Be yourself. Ask for somebody else's help. That's my other advice. Ask another woman to be your mentor.
Right.
I sure was lucky in Senator Dole's office, because I had the chief of staff who was a woman as a mentor. I had his political director who was a woman as a mentor. Lots of people in high profile roles that he had. Audrey Coleman, I am so honored that you were able to be with us today. Thank you so much. See you soon.